get started. I am sorry for the delay. I got off work and I came to work on the stream, but I fell asleep. That's horrible. But I guess I needed it. I woke up at like 6:30 and was like, no, I need to get on the stream. So I hopped on here, and I'm still kind of waking up. Okay, so let's get started. We've got a couple of articles to go through. I went and found a couple of articles on Homo longi, the new hominin that was in the news last week, known as Dragon Man. Figured we can go through a couple of those to see what the researchers found rather than just looking at the scientific news. And that's about it. I don't have a lesson planned for today. I think so. The last Wednesdays I'm going to be doing the Native American tribe series that I wanted to do, and I'll have the voting up on Discord to get that chosen for this month to give me enough time to do some research and even go more in depth than I did last time. Then I wanted to do another series, so that's the last Wednesday of every month, second Wednesday of every month. Perhaps do another series where I choose a hominin species that was at some point identified, whether it's still considered a species or has been added into another one or not, is possibly something, but we go into depth about when it was found, where it was found, how old it is, what are the defining characteristics of that species, and I think that might be a really good series to do as well, because a lot of people know about ones like Neanderthals and Homo erectus, but you don't know about the Denisovans or Floresiensis or any of those, and it might be good to cover the lesser known ones. And then there's also like the Paranthropus and the Australopithecines that a lot of people don't know about. So I'll be adding another series, and we will do another survey on that one on the Discord as well. And that way people can choose which one they might want to learn about without actually knowing which one they're choosing. So, yeah, stay tuned for that one. I'll need to get the little straw poll going for that one. But let's go ahead and get started on this. So we got, after rooting DeSoto, Chickasaws repurposed Spanish objects for everyday use. So, archaeologists have unearthed a rare trove of more than 80 metal objects in Mississippi, thought to be from Hernando de Soto's 16th century expedition to the southeast, many of the objects were repurposed by resident Chickasaws as household tools and ornaments, an unusual practice at the time when European goods in North America were few and often reserved for leaders. I mean, people repurpose things all the time. You're not going to take an object and just throw it out because you don't want to use it for the intended purposes. People do that all the time. It's not really something you see in the certain westernized groups anymore. At least here in the US, you see a lot more of buying new and not really repurposing. Although that seems to be changing, which is really cool. We used to do that a lot. Your average American person used to repurpose things all the time. But when mass production and like quick waste kind of became a thing, that didn't really happen. You replace it. So you get a hole in your jeans, you're not going to keep the jeans, you're not going to patch them really. You're not going to reuse that fabric. Something that I do that I've really enjoyed doing is I got into sewing a lot. I kind of learned when I was younger, and then got into sewing, just random things a couple years ago, kind of improving on my own hobby. And cloth is expensive, especially if you're just trying to learn basic things. So something you can do is go to your thrift store and get some bed sheets, super cheap, just a couple bucks, and it's actually quite a lot of fabric, especially if it's a king-size bed, which is nice. Anyways, repurposing, very common. Archaeologists have unearthed a rare trove of more than 80 objects in Mississippi, blah, 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 read that. The researchers believe Spaniards left the objects behind while fleeing a Chickasaw attack that followed frayed relations between the two groups in 1541. The victors took advantage of the windfall of spoils, axe heads, blades, nails, and other items made of iron, lead, and copper alloy, modifying many of them to suit local uses and tastes. Chickasaw craftspeople turned pieces of Spanish horseshoes into scrapers, barrel hands into cutting tools, and bits of copper into jingling pendants. The sheer abundance of objects from the site on an area of northeastern Mississippi known as Stark Farms is one of the factors that makes the find unique, said Charles Cobb, the study's lead author and Florida Museum of Natural History Lockwood Chair in Historical Archaeology. So, reading scientific articles, you always gotta say who is talking, what they said, and saying their credentials. And it always ends up taking up at least half a paragraph. Sometimes it takes up more, especially if there's multiple authors. Typically, we might find a handful of European objects in connection with a high-status person or some other special context. But this must have been more of an open season, a pulse of goods that became widely available for a short period of time. If the researchers' diagnosis is correct, Stark Farms is only the second to yield convincing archaeological evidence of direct contact with De Soto's expedition. After the historic site of the Appalachee capital of Anhaica in present-day Tallahassee, Cobb said, unconquered and unconquerable. At the time De Soto arrived in Mississippi in 1540, the conquistador had trekked through southeast for more than a year with about 600 people, hundreds of horses and pigs and heavy equipment in tow. A shrewd man with a reputation for bloodshed, De Soto was previously a key figure in the Spanish destruction of the Inca Empire in South America, and came to Florida with an eye to further increase his wealth. Finding little gold, he pressed deeper into the interior, alternately friending and warring with Native Americans he encountered. The Spaniards began on a friendly, if aloof, footing with the Chickasaws, whose leader, known as Chickasha gave them a modest village in which to spend the winter, but tensions rose as the months dragged on. De Soto executed 2 Chickasaws and cut off the hands of another accused of stealing pigs. Oof. The Chickasaws, who farmed maize in the region's rich prairie soil, also must have grown tired of providing food and shelter for such a large encampment of uninvited guests. With spring drawing near, De Soto demanded that Chickasha provide him with the hundreds of Chickasaws to carry the Spaniards' equipment to their next destination. According to Spanish accounts of the expedition, the conversation did not go well. Oof, very entitled man here. Shortly afterwards, the Chickasaws launched a surprise attack under the cover of night, torching a Spanish camp and killing at least a dozen men, as well as many horses and pigs. The retreating Spaniards set up another camp about a mile away, where they were assaulted a second time. Better prepared, they fought back, but soon picked up and headed north, having lost much of their livestock, clothing, and goods. Meanwhile, the Chickasaws collected from the battlefield dozens of prized metal objects, usually reserved by the Europeans for strategic trades or as gifts to smooth relations with local leaders. It's kind of like inflation, Cobb said. You don't want too much stuff to get out, or that gift will be devalued. That's what makes this site unusual. After Chickasaws sent the Spanish packing, the region remained largely free of European presence for nearly 150 years. This research shows how Chickasaws adapted to invasion by alien intruders and secured their reputation as unconquered and unconquerable, said study co-author Brad Lieb, director of Chickasaw archaeology for the Chickasaw Nation Heritage Preservation Division. The findings are remarkable in their success in addressing a baseline event in Chickasaw cultural history. They first encountered with Hernando de Soto and the Spanish invaders. That's awesome. Interesting. So, the Chickasaws being known as not conquerable is sort of due to strategic timing, it seems. If they hadn't been on friendly terms at first with the explorers in this group, they wouldn't have slowly developed this negative relationship and then eventually attacked them at night, which gives them great upper hand on the whole situation if they were sleeping and wasn't expecting this. So they were able to just kind of kick them out of their territory, move them along. And then their time with the Spaniards, they probably learned a lot about them, the way they think, and what sort of technology they have, which undoubtedly they would have passed on to the next couple generations of leaders and warriors, which seems exactly what they did, and prepared for any new incomers that came. Very interesting. Style and type of objects, as well as their location, aligned with Spanish accounts of the De Soto expedition and 1541 battle at Chickasha. the main Chickasaw town, but the researchers found no evidence of a burned village with remains of horses and pigs. Cobb said the site was likely a village near Chickasha, whose inhabitants visited the site of the conflict and brought items back to their households. They may also have acquired some of the objects during the previous winter through under-the-table trading with Spanish soldiers. The Chickasaws generally relied on bone, cane, or stone as raw materials for their cutting and scraping tools, making the haul of metal a particular boon. While some of the objects retained their original form, the Chickasaws painstakingly reworked others into more familiar shapes. They bent metal back and forth until it broke and ground down and smoothed edges, modifying tools to mimic the design of their traditional Chickasaw counterparts. One of the most stunning things we found is an exact iron replica of a Native American stone kilt, or axe head. Cobb said, "I've never seen anything like this in the Southeast before." Among the more sobering finds were chain links pulled apart with sharpened edges. The Spanish brought reams of chains with them to shackle Native Americans as captives and porters. Cobb said this is evidence of some of the first examples of European enslavement of people in what is now the U.S. The refashioned items from Stark Farms represent a stage of Native American experimentation and improvisation with foreign items that largely faded by the late 1700s and 1800s as they folded European materials and technology more completely into their own. In the 1500s, a thimble might be turned into a bangle. By the late 1700s, a thimble is a thimble. Cobb said, "You tend to see a more regular adaptation of goods over time." De Soto failed to establish any permanent settlements in the southeast, joining a line of ill-fated expeditions that demonstrated the precariousness of Europeans' early attempts to dominate the region. He succumbed to a fever on the banks of the Mississippi River in 1542, and his remaining band of men made rafts and floated south to Mexico, where they found passage back to Spain. There they undertook a repurposing effort of their own. Having failed to find fame and fortune in the Americas, they sold their stories, many of which became best-selling books, Cobb said. There was a thriving industry in explore and survival tales. Hold on. It's getting dark. I'm just going to turn the light on. That didn't help. Now I have like a glow behind me. And I look blue. That made things worse. Better for me, but not for you. How about just a small one? I'll just have to sit in the dark. Alright. Let's see. National Museum of Natural History. 5 free natural history programs streaming in July. A lot of the museums, be it national ones, state ones, are pretty active and actually have a lot of really cool things that a lot of people don't know about. So I figured I'd share this just to give people a little idea of what's going on. Where is it? see what you got. Pollination DC ongoing through fall. Help Pollination DC, a community science project led by ecologists at the museum and the University of the District of Columbia Center for Sustainable Development and Resilience, document the insect species pollinating plants in community gardens throughout Washington, D.C. and garden on the National Mall. It is easy to participate. Join the project on iNaturalist. Snap photos of insects and the plants they land on and upload them for identification. These records will not only help scientists document the diversity of insects that pollinate gardens in the nation's capital, but also gardeners growing plants for food. That's cool. So they need to know what's moving around where, and that makes sense. So as the climate shifts and changes, something you don't really think about is the insects are going to move as well. So the climate's going to change, the plants are going to move, they're going to go where they thrive the most, be that up the hill, up the mountain, down the valley, or across the state. And with that, insects move as well. From there, you'll get up the entire chain. Let's see. So we got anthropologists challenging the face of scientists. Meet paleoanthropologist Brianna Habener and museum technician Amanda Lawrence and hear from them about what it is like to be a woman in science in this interactive webinar. Habener and Lawrence will talk about the people and experiences that significantly impacted their journeys and the skills that helped them be successful and the challenges they overcame. This program is part of the Smithsonian American Women's History Initiative because of her story and ambitious undertaking to research, collect, document, display, and share the compelling story of women. Interesting. So not only just women in science, but specifically paleoanthropologists, which is what we're all about on this channel. A virtual film screening and discussion of feedback loops permafrost. Permafrost, an expanse of frozen ground covering 1/4 of the northern hemisphere, is thawing. As it does, microscopic animals are waking up and feeding on the previously frozen carbon stored in plant and animal remains, releasing heat-trapping gases as a byproduct. These gases further warm the atmosphere, melting more permafrost in a dangerous feedback loop. With permafrost containing twice as much carbon as the atmosphere, its thaw could release 150 billion tons of carbon by the end of the century. Watch the film Feedback Loops Permafrost at your convenience for registering and tune in on July 14th for a live discussion. At home in the rainforest canopy, so we got a sloth. Join museum technician Ingrid Rochen as she explores the canopy layer of the Panamanian rainforest. Cool. Our paleontologist Kay Berensmeyer and Camilla Souto are challenging the face of science. Say hello to paleontologist Kay Berensmeyer and Camilla Souto and hear from them about what it is like being women in science in the interactive event. Berensmeyer and Camilla will talk about the people and experiences that significantly impacted their journeys, the skills that helped them. Is this part of the same? Yeah, it is. Women's History Initiative. Same one. Probably just a different time. July 29th at 2. And July 8th at 2. Nice. So, those things, if you're interested in any of them, you should definitely check them out. Smithsonian has a lot of really cool stuff going on. Global climate dynamics drove the decline of mastodons and elephants, new study suggests. Elephants and their forebears were pushed into wipeout by waves of extreme global environmental change rather than overhunting by early humans, according to new research. The study published today in Nature Ecology of Evolution challenges claims that early human hunters slaughtered prehistoric elephants, mammoths, and mastodons to extinction over millennia. That's kind of a thought that's been going on for a while. That goes with other things that died off, so other species that went extinct, and cultures, nations, any tribes, stuff like that. Well, maybe not tribes, but civilizations. It's never just one thing that brings them down. It's a combination. Same with the Neanderthals. It used to be thought that the competition between them and Homo sapiens is what killed them. Homo sapiens was just better hunters. When more information comes out and there's always more to the story. So to wipe something large and diverse as an entire species, it's usually gonna be changes in food, changes in their immediate environment, plus the hunting, plus disease, so there's a lot going on. Fecal records show Maya population affected by climate change. A McGill-led study has shown that the size of the Maya population in the lowland city of Itzan, in present-day Guatemala, varied over time in response to climate change. The findings published recently in Quaternary Science Reviews show that both droughts and very wet periods led to important population declines. These results are based on using a relatively new technique involving looking at stanols, organic molecules found in human and animal fecal matter, taken from the bottom of a nearby lake. Measurements of stanols were used to establish changes in population size and to examine how they align with information about climate variability and changes in By using the technique, researchers were able to chart major Maya population changes in the area over a period starting 3,300 years before present. They were also able to identify shifts in settlement patterns that took place over the course of hundreds of years that are associated with changes in land use and agricultural practices. They discovered, moreover, that the land had been settled earlier than previously suggested by archaeological evidence. The evidence from fecal stanols suggests that humans were present on the Itzan escarpment about 650 years before the archaeological evidence confirms it. It also shows that the Maya continued to occupy the area, albeit in smaller number, after the so-called collapse between 800 and 1000 AD, when it had previously been believed that drought or warfare caused the entire population to desert the area. There is further evidence of a large population spike around the same time as a historical record of refugees fleeing the Spanish attack of 1697 on the last Maya stronghold in the southern Maya lowlands, modern-day Flores de Guatemala. Something that had not been known before. Estimates of ancient population size in the Maya lowlands have traditionally been obtained through ground inspection and excavation. To reconstruct population dynamics, archaeologists locate, map, and count residential structures, and they excavate them to establish dates of occupation. They compare population trends at the site and regional levels, and they then use techniques such as pollen analysis and indicators of soil erosion into lakes to reconstruct the ecological changes that took place at the same time. Hi. Welcome, viewers. We are talking about the Maya right now. The fecal sample from the settlement in Laguna Itzin confirms that the Maya population in the area declined due to drought at 3 different periods between 90 and 280 AD, between 730 and 900 AD, and during the much less well-studied drought between 1350 and 950. The researchers also found that the population declined during a very wet period from 400 to 210 BC, something which has received little attention until now. Population decline in response to both dry and wet periods shows that there were climatic effects on population at both climate extremes and not only during dry periods. So, it's interesting. It's something that's not really talked about too much in the general population of why the Maya or the Aztec civilizations fail when the Spaniards arrived. But they were already kind of in social, economic flux due to climate differences, which have a massive effect on civilization. I know that today we kind of lose track of that, but with how current trends in climate are going, we're feeling that more and more, and this is exactly what they would have been dealing with, the effects of those things more and more. It's just like slowly getting darker in here, so I'm starting to just reflect the light. Okay, moving on. It's this Dragon Rank also. Nothing to reveal that. Okay, I wanted to go over It's starting to get hot in here. How is this look? Out of 10 AC, yeah. There we go. In Eastern Asia, several late Pleistocene human fossils such as the Dali, Jinnarashan, Hualongdong, and Harbin crania evidently resemble each other and are phylogenetically closer to H. sapiens than to H. neanderthalensis or other archaic humans. The Harbin cranium is the most preserved of this group. It shows a mosaic combination of plesiomorphic and apomorphic features. Here we suggest that Harbin skull should be recognized as a new species of Homo. Systematic biology. So here's an image of said skull. Oh, that's not bigger. Oh, there we go. Okay, so we got this skull. Very nice preservation, very, very good. The species name is derived from the geographic name Longjiang, which is common usage for the Heilongjiang province and literally means dragon river. An undistorted and almost complete cranium. So this is the categorization number from the excavation that they had. The specimen was donated to IBGEO University in 2018. The repository is the Geoscience Museum of HG. Hey, Drewski. How's it going? The holotype of Homo longi. So a holotype is the specimen that best represents the the species. It is the first identified of that species, and it is the basis used to identify future individuals. So we have the Middle Pleistocene, upper part of the Upper Huangshan Formation. So 138 to 309,000 years ago, near the Dongjiang Bridge in Harbin City. The reliable minimum U-series age is 148, give or take 2,000 years. Differing from all other named Homo species by presenting a combination of the following features: an extinct hominin massive in size with a very large maximum cranium length, nasio-occipital length, and supraorbital torus breadth. So, might be a lot there that is a little confusing, so let's open this. That. So I'm just gonna actually, no, don't do that. Oof. So, there we go. Let's see what they're talking about. Very large maximum cranial length. So we're talking from here, it's going to be here, back. So it's quite long, as you can see. Nasio-occipital length. So the occipital is your bone back here. The nasio is right here, the top of the nose bridge. So you have a measurement taken from here, back, then you from here, back, and then supraorbital torus breadth. So supraorbital is above orbit, eyes. So we got this. Cranial vault long and low. As you can see, the forehead is kind of low, and then it's gonna come back pretty far. With receding frontal, evenly curved parietal contour, rounded occipital contour. So parietal is right here. So you can see it right here, the sutures, and then it comes up, it comes to the frontal and the occipital. So the parietal is just kind of your side up part. Rounded occipital contour, so pretty rounded eyes. Nose sagittal keeling. Upper face extremely wide, with large and almost square orbits. Facial height low relative to the upper facial breadth. Supraorbital torus is wide, so yeah. Massively developed and gently curved. Just a gentle little curve there. Super massively curved interorbital area width. With a flat and recessed nasal saddle. So pretty wide here, and then kind of recessed in here. Which makes sense if you're going to have such a pronounced brow ridge here. Cheekbones flat and low with a shallow canine fossa. So right here, not too pronounced. occipital torus is weak. Well, it could also just be in this individual. We need to compare them to the other ones. Without suprailiac fossa, palate in U shape, with shallow and thick alveolar bone. Incisor sockets angled, suggesting the presence of alveolar prognathism. Mastoid process is large, which is right here, which is variable depending on one's sex. Mastoid process large, inclining forward and inward. Tympanic plate, anterior inferior surface flat and moderately thick. Styloid process fused to the tympanic. Styloid process is a little tiny bone that comes out about here. Comparative morphology. The Harbin cranium is massive in size, larger than all other known archaic humans. The endocranial capacity is established as 1,428 milliliters. So this is the internal case, brain case. Falling in the range of H. sapiens and Neanderthals, and larger than other Homo species such as H. erectus and H. naledi, Floresiensis, and even some H. heidelbergensis, H. rhodesiensis. The Harbin cranium is relatively long and low and lacks the globularity of the modern human brain case. So, modern humans got a little bit more upward lift here in the forehead. It's more rounded, so it's going to come up more, and then it's not going to go back as much, and it's going to be a little bit more rounded. Whereas this individual, it's much lower, longer, which is how Neanderthals are generally built as well. The large endocranial volume of Harbin cranium is reflected in more parallel side walls of the temporals and parietals, but the cranium lacks the H. sapiens-like parietal bosses. The thickness of the supraorbital torus is proportionally much greater than that of later H. sapiens. The Harbin cranium does also share some similarities with H. sapiens. Its facial height is very low. The zygomaxillary region is flat with zygomaxillary, so you've got it about right here. Canine fossa and the overall prognathism is reduced. So prognathism is how far you're going to protrude out in this general region of the mouth. The Bayesian angle-Nasion angle plot indicates that the Harbin cranium is much closer to H. sapiens than to H. erectus and H. heidelbergensis / rhodesiensis, and the face is hafted onto the brain case with reduced prognathism. In its combination of traits, Harbin is more like fossil attributed to early sapiens, such as Jebel Irhoud I and Eli Springs, than to later members of our lineage. There are very small angular tori inferiorly on the parietals, proportionally much smaller than those in H. erectus. The occipital has relatively rounded lateral profile, presenting a less flexed form than the typical H. erectus. The occipital torus is almost absent, much weaker than in H. erectus. The face is relatively low and lacks the anterior projection typical of H. erectus. orbital construction is also proportionally shallower than in most members of H. erectus. The tympanic bone of the Harbin cranium is flat and thin and lacks the robusticity typical of H. erectus. Okay. I'm gonna do this. Ooh, it's getting very hot. You just want to pull up this. Let's see. We got a Neanderthal individual here with a good side view. And then we wanted let's see. This one. Okay. So here we've got a Neanderthal individual and then an erectus individual, and then, you know what, let's do this too. Get a human skull up and going as well. I'll just leave it like this because there's so much variation going on here. Okay. So this one's comparing to H. erectus a lot. Talking about the occipital torus is almost absent, much weaker than an H. erectus. So occipital back here. So let's look at, of course I chose like one that doesn't have it from the side much. Oops. Other side view. Side view. So we've got this individual. The others don't have it on the side very well. Harbin cranial vault lacks the parasagittal flattening and healing found in some Heidelbergensis rhodesiensis. The occipital bone lacks the angulation and strange transverse torus. Face is relatively low and lacks anterior projection. Okay, compared with Neanderthals. There you go, that's what I wanted. Bam. Neanderthals. The strong lateral the Harbin cranium also has a massive and curved supraorbital torus with strong lateral thickness. post-orbital construction of the Harbin cranium is proportionally deeper than those of Neanderthals. So the Harbin cranium also has a massive and curved supraorbital torus, so this thing, with strong lateral thickness, so it's still pretty thick over here, whereas as the brow ridge decreases in size, it tends to get thinner over here on the sides. Approaches that the occipital surface lacks both a chignon and centrally developed supraaniac fossa typical of Neanderthals. So a chignon is the bun. They're saying the occipital surface lacks the bun. So Neanderthals have a nice little bun here that is pretty defining of the species. I don't know. Developed supraaniac fossa typical of Neanderthals. The zygomaxillary angle is somewhat larger than in Neanderthals and approaches. So this one kind of shows it here. Let's see. I could get another one. Or like none of them side viewed. H. Ancestor is smaller than the Harbin cranium with weaker supraorbital development, much smaller endocranial volume, so the brain is smaller, narrower upper face width, and much smaller molars. So overall, the Harbin cranium shows a distinctive combination of apomorphic and plesiomorphic features. These features present a clear diagnosis supporting the Harbin cranium as a new species of Homo, which is distinctive from other designated Middle-Late Pleistocene human taxa, such as H. sapiens, H. erectus, H. neanderthalensis, and H. heidelbergensis rhodesiensis. The Dolly cranium was initially proposed as a subspecies of H. sapiens, so H. sapien deliensis, but Wu abandoned the subspecies name and called the cranium archaic H. sapiens in his later publications. It also suggested to be a subspecies of heidelbergensis, or should be raised to the species level H. deliensis. The Hualongdong cranium shows a lot of interesting similarities with the Dali cranium based on a morphological comparison and phylogenetic analysis. We suggest that both the Dali and the Hualongdong crania should be referred to H. daliensis. The Harbin cranium, on the other hand, shows clear diagnostic features differing from the Dali and Hualongdong cranium. Here we raise a new species name for the Harbin cranium to reflect these significant differences, given the sister group relationships between the Harbin cranium and the Xiaohe mandible. It is possible that both specimens belong to H. longi species. Further human fossils from the Middle Pleistocene of China and neighboring areas will test this idea. So, when I first saw this, I saw this right here, and I thought that was kind of an occipital bun, but they're saying no. Interesting. So that's all the very specific physio characteristics that they compared to 3 different species to justify why they're saying this is a different species. Something I would really like is for the paleoanthropological community to kind of come up with more defined categories and like of variability allowed within a species. Really, it's just you look at it, you compare. If it's different enough, you can state it. Having more like measurable differences, I think, is something that kind of needs to develop. Maybe not fully 100% what is used to identify new species or to categorize existing species, but I think it could become quite useful and help in organizing these specimens we find. Alright, so I hope this was informative, and I will be here next week, 6 o'clock. Sorry for the late start this time. I did not mean to fall asleep. That's horrible. Alright. Until next time, have a wonderful week.